Welcome to Dark Feed, where once you find the feed, it finds you. They were just closing up for the night. For teenage girls, working a part-time job at a yogurt shop in suburban Austin, Texas. The kind of place where you take your kids after school, where the smell of vanilla and sugar hangs in the air, where the lights are soft, the music is low, and nothing bad ever happens. Until December 6, 1991, until 4 young girls were murdered, tied up, gagged, shot in the head, and set on fire. It would become one of the most horrific mass murders in Texas history. And even now, decades later, no one really knows who did it, or why. But someone does, because someone walked into that yogurt shop that night with a plan. And 4 girls never walked out. The shop was located at 2949 West Anderson Lane, a clean, busy strip mall near central Austin. That Friday night, it was staffed by 2 teenage employees. Eliza Thomas, 17. Jennifer Harbison, also 17. Jennifer's younger sister, Sarah Harbison, 15, and her friend Amy Ayers, 13, were hanging out there while they waited for a ride home. They weren't supposed to be working. They weren't even supposed to be there. But they were sipping yogurt, talking, laughing. Just a normal night. They had plans the next day. Sarah was in high school band. Amy loved animals. Jennifer had a boyfriend. Eliza was known for being sweet, quiet, and reliable. No one knew it would be their last night alive. Around 11 p.m., several customers came in for a last-minute dessert before closing time. One of them, a man in a military-style jacket, was seen lingering in the shop with another man long after others left. At 11:47 p.m., the cash register printed the final receipt. 1 yogurt, paid for with a $5 bill. Police would later call this the last transaction of the night. Minutes later, the lights were turned off. A security guard walking the strip mall noticed the darkened storefront. Nothing strange. By 12 a.m., the shop appeared quiet. Then the smoke. At 12:23 a.m., firefighters responded to a call of heavy smoke coming from the yogurt shop. They broke through the back door. The fire was intense, hot, fast-burning, and suspicious. They made their way through the scorched building, navigating charred furniture, melted counters, and falling debris. Then, they saw something in the back corner of the shop. Bodies, 4 of them, stacked, burned, naked, bound, shot. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. All 4 girls had been stripped naked. They'd been gagged with clothing, bound, and shot in the head with a .22 caliber weapon. Some had been shot multiple times. Sarah had been shot 6 times. But the fire had destroyed so much evidence. Bullets melted, DNA ruined, fingerprints scorched away. The oldest, Jennifer and Eliza, were found tied together back to back, gagged, and executed. Sarah was found nearby, partially undressed, gagged, and shot. Amy Ayers, the youngest, had the most complex injuries. She was shot once, but the bullet grazed her brain. Somehow, she was still alive. They shot her again, this time with a .380 caliber gun, then set her body on fire. Investigators believe she may have still been breathing when the flames took her. She was just 13. The community was shattered. This wasn't a drug house. It wasn't a gang location. It was a frozen yogurt shop. Why would someone commit such a sadistic, overkill-style crime against 4 young girls? Robbery? No, $540 was left behind in the register. Sexual assault? There were signs, but fire damage made it impossible to confirm. A targeted hit? Nothing pointed to a motive.
No threats, no stalkers, no enemies.
Just a cold, brutal act of mass murder, and nothing stolen. And that made it worse. Because if this wasn't about money, what the hell was it about? Within 48 hours, police began investigating every angle. A cult ritual? A serial predator? A robbery gone wrong? Someone the girls knew? Theories poured in, and so did tips. Over 50 people confessed in the first few years, some mentally ill, others craving attention, and a few who actually knew chilling details. But all were dead ends. Leads evaporated. Witnesses changed stories, and the trail began to go cold. Austin wasn't used to this. It wasn't a city of mass murder. It wasn't a city of fear. But after the yogurt shop killings, everything changed. Parents no longer let their kids work late. Businesses hired extra security. And for the first time in years, Austin was afraid and angry. They wanted anyone held accountable. The pressure on police was massive. And eventually that pressure would lead to arrests. But not answers, and not justice. Detectives focused in on 4 teenagers from North Austin High School. One of them, Maurice Pierce, was found carrying a .22 pistol, the same caliber used in the crime, just days after the murders. But his story didn't hold. He claimed his friend, Forrest Wellborn, committed the killings using his gun. Wellborn denied it. No physical evidence tied either of them to the crime. And Pierce's gun? Ballistics didn't match. They were both released, for now, but police weren't done with them. Over the next few years, these names would resurface again and again, and the cracks in the investigation would start to show. Because by the time the case finally went to trial, the confessions were falling apart. The physical evidence was gone, and the fire that started in the back of a yogurt shop would spread all the way to the courtroom. But that's in part 2, because before there was a trial, there were years of silence, and families left wondering why no one had been brought to justice. By the time the bodies were pulled from the ash, the damage was already done. Not just to the victims, not just to their families, but to the case itself. Because fire doesn't just destroy evidence, it erases it. And that night, December 6, 1991, 4 girls died in more ways than one. The bullets that killed them melted. The DNA that could have identified their killers burned. The timeline blurred, twisted by smoke and time. And in that vacuum, the space left by scorched truth, confusion took root. And with it came silence. Not just from the killer, but from the system meant to stop him. From 1991 to 1999, 8 years, the case remained frozen.
No arrests. No indictments.
Just a community stuck in time. The parents of the victims held candlelight vigils every year. Detectives came and went. Tips dried up. Every so often, a new suspect emerged. Confession here, a whisper there, but they all led nowhere. Then, out of nowhere, the case caught fire again. And it all started with a name they already knew. In 1999, Austin police circled back to an old lead, Maurice Pierce, the teenager found with a .22 pistol days after the murders. The same caliber used in the crime. Pierce had once pointed the finger at a friend, Forrest Wellborn. The case went nowhere back then. But in 1999, detectives brought him in again. And this time, they turned up the heat. Not just on Pierce, but on his 3 friends, Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Forrest Wellborn again, and Pierce himself. All 4 were now in their mid-20s. Normal lives, jobs, some had families. And now they were being accused of one of the most brutal mass murders in Texas history. Detectives interrogated Michael Scott for over 20 hours. No lawyer.
No sleep.
No break. He was told again and again, "We know you did it. We just need you to say it." Eventually, he did. He confessed. He described the girls tied up, described the fire, said he and his friends had gone to the yogurt shop to rob it. But something went wrong. He said Robert Springsteen raped one of the girls. He said Pierce shot them. He cried. He broke. He gave the cops what they wanted. But something was off. Scott's timeline didn't match the known facts. He didn't know how many girls were there. He got details of the crime wrong. Still, it was a confession. And in a case this cold, any confession was gold. Soon after, Robert Springsteen confessed too. And like Scott, he also got things wrong. But that didn't stop prosecutors. Because now they had two confessions, supposedly confirming each other. And that was enough to move forward. In 2001, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen were charged with capital murder. Pierce and Wellborn were not. Pierce was never indicted. Wellborn's case was thrown out by a grand jury. But Scott and Springsteen, they were painted as monsters. And with no physical evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints, the prosecution leaned hard on the confessions. Even though both men said they were coerced, there were no recordings of most of the interrogation. No other suspects were pursued. The girls' families were divided. Some believed, others didn't. In the end, Springsteen was convicted in 2001. Scott in 2002. Both were sentenced to life in prison. In 2008, everything fell apart. New DNA testing, unavailable in 1991, was conducted on samples taken from the crime scene. The results were clear. The male DNA found on one of the victims did not match Scott. It did not match Springsteen. It did not match Maurice Pierce. And it did not match Wellborn. In fact, it didn't match anyone in the system. It was the DNA of a completely unknown man. Someone never questioned, never arrested, never named. The implications were staggering. If the only two men convicted didn't leave DNA behind, then what were their confessions really worth? And who did the DNA belong to? Faced with new evidence, the courts had no choice. In 2009, both Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen were released from prison after nearly a decade behind bars. Charges were dropped, but not dismissed. Technically, they could be retried, but without physical evidence. And with confessions now considered unreliable, it was unlikely. And just like that, the only two people ever convicted of the yogurt shop murders were set free. The case returned to limbo, and the real killer, still out there. The release of Scott and Springsteen was a bombshell. Some families were relieved. Others were furious. They had believed in the convictions, believed justice had been done. Now they were being told it was a mistake, that they had mourned for a lie, and worse, that the person who had burned their daughters alive might never be found. The police were embarrassed. The district attorney's office was in damage control. And the public? They were done hoping, done trusting. Because if the system could screw up a case like this, with 4 murdered girls and the full weight of law enforcement behind it, then what hope did any victim have? In 2010, Maurice Pierce, the original suspect, was pulled over in a routine traffic stop in Austin. He fled on foot. When an officer caught up, a struggle ensued. Pierce allegedly pulled a knife. The officer shot and killed him. Just like that, the final member of the Austin Four was gone. And with him, another piece of the story vanished. No full confession.
No closure.
Just another trail gone cold. To this day, the unknown DNA profile found at the crime scene has never been matched. Not to a local, not to a known offender, not even through familial DNA, the technology that helped identify the Golden State Killer. That profile could belong to the true killer, or it could belong to an unknown accomplice. Either way, it means someone else was there. Someone not named Scott, not Springsteen, not Pierce, not Wellborn. Someone who never spoke and never got caught. The old yogurt shop building is long gone, leveled, rebuilt. But in Austin, people still remember. People who were kids then, now adults, still tell their children about that night. Still warn them, don't stay out too late. Don't trust anyone. And always look behind you when you're closing up. Because monsters don't always break in. Sometimes, they wait, right outside, smiling, patient, ready to walk into your store, order a cup of yogurt, and change your life forever. Justice. The word echoed through every courtroom. It echoed through every interview, every press release, every candlelight vigil. Justice for Eliza. Justice for Jennifer. Justice for Sarah. justice for Amy. But what happens when justice becomes a smokescreen? When the truth gets warped by time, pressure, and public panic? When the wrong people are locked up and the right ones walk free? Someone walked into that yogurt shop that night with a plan. And decades later, we still don't know who. When the fire crews broke into the back of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, in the early hours of December 7th, 1991, they weren't prepared for what they found. Bodies, stacked, burned, bound, for young girls. And as the smoke cleared, investigators were left staring into a black hole of forensic failure. Because this case wasn't just horrific, it was ruined from day one. The act of putting out the fire, using high-pressure water, tools, and entry force, destroyed fragile evidence. Dozens of first responders walked through the crime scene before it was sealed. Certain items collected were misplaced or improperly stored, later deemed inadmissible. The key confessions from suspects Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen were mostly unrecorded. Not one piece of physical evidence ever connected any suspect to the scene. But the worst mistake? They locked onto suspects too early, and they didn't let go. Let's break this down. Maurice Pierce had a .22 pistol, but the bullets used on the victims didn't match his weapon. Michael Scott confessed under extreme pressure after 20-plus hours of interrogation. Robert Springsteen said he was involved, but his story didn't match Scott's. Forrest Wellborn was implicated, but never charged. And all of them, every single one, had no DNA found at the scene. So why were they pursued so aggressively? Because the city was demanding answers, and police needed to give them something, even if it wasn't real. In 2008, after Scott and Springsteen were already behind bars, a breakthrough shattered everything. A male DNA profile was found inside one of the victims, and it did not match any of the four suspects. This wasn't a partial match. This wasn't inconclusive. This was a completely unknown male. Someone never arrested, never interviewed, never named. And when that information came out, the house of cards collapsed. Charges were dropped. Convictions were overturned. Scott and Springsteen walked free. But there's something even more disturbing. The DNA still hasn't been matched. To this day, we don't know who it belongs to. A customer? A stranger? The killer? No one knows. Some families of the victims believe Scott and Springsteen are guilty. Others are convinced they were framed. But they all agree on one thing. The state failed them. We were told this was solved. We were told to move on. And now we're back at square one. They've lived through 3 decades of grief. Watched their daughters buried. Watched 4 men put on trial. Watched the convictions fall apart. Now they're left with memories and no justice. Even with the original suspects discredited, the theories haven't stopped. 2 men were seen lingering in the shop near closing time. One was in military fatigues. They never came forward. Were they casing the shop? Did they panic and kill everyone? Some investigators believe it was a single male, someone who entered the shop, restrained the girls, committed a sexual assault, and set the fire to destroy evidence. A stranger, a drifter, a name we've never heard. Others say it had to be more than one person, tying up for victims, raping at least one, executing them, setting a fire, all within 20 to 30 minutes? That's not easy for one man to do alone, unless it was someone they trusted. There are still strange details about the scene that have never been fully explained. A burned paper towel dispenser was believed to be used as kindling. Amy Ayres, the youngest, was found in a different room, suggesting she may have escaped and been recaptured. One bullet wound suggests a different caliber than the others, potentially meaning more than one weapon. But perhaps the most disturbing, none of the doors were forced open, which means the killer was let in. As of now, the DNA remains unmatched. The case is technically still open. There is no one in custody, and no leads announced. In 2021, the Austin Police Department stated they had not given up and we're continuing to work with new forensic technologies. But with each year that passes, hope dims. Witnesses forget, evidence fades, and the killer or killers grow older. Or maybe they're already dead. There's something uniquely painful about unsolved crimes like this. They live in limbo. They're too brutal to forget, too broken to resolve, and too messy for closure. We tell ourselves justice always comes. We say monsters can't hide forever, but sometimes they do. They walk among us, change their names, start new lives, and sometimes they walk into a yogurt shop on a Friday night, smile at 4 girls behind the counter, and leave behind nothing but fire.